All right, everybody. Well, welcome to today's Coaching Cafe, Bad Questions and How to Avoid Ineffective Questions. My name's Bridget Calvert and I'm the Learning and Development Manager for the Open Door Coaching Group. And I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about bad questions. So firstly, bear with me, sorry. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we meet today and their continuing connection to the land, waters and communities of Australia. We pay our respects to them and to their elders past, present and emerging. So just to clarify or just to remind you that you can earn continuing coach education hours via this webinar. So if you have an ICF credential, this webinar can earn you those CCE hours that you will need to renew it. So head over to our website to register for the CCE. For more information and to register, just go to opendoorcoaching.com.au/CCE. All right, well, let's have a look. So over the past few weeks of our coaching cafes, I know that Natalie's been highlighting some highly effective coaching tools from our accredited coach training programs. But for this week, for a bit of fun, we thought we'd turn our attention to bad questions, those questions that are ineffective and actually have a negative impact in the workplace. And you'd be surprised how many ineffective questions are out there in the workplace. So our agenda for today is to look at what makes a question ineffective, what's the impact on the coachee, what's a good reframe. So they're the areas that we're going to focus our attention on today. I'd like to create a shared learning experience, that sense of community, and would invite some thought-provoking conversations. So I welcome you to please share your questions and comments and contributions to the chat, which would be really, really helpful. So let's have a look at the impact of ineffective questions. Well, first of all, we certainly need to avoid ineffective questions. And this is important because bad questions can potentially break rapport with the person that you're asking. It can certainly create defensiveness. Ineffective questions can shut the coachee down. They also tend to reduce choices or options that the coachee potentially could have. And it also places the coach in the space. So rather than staying out of the space, ineffective questions tend to put you in that space and can create this sort of bad energy around the question or the conversation. So as Peter Drucker says, the most serious mistakes are not being made as a result of wrong answers. The truly dangerous thing is asking the wrong questions. So some of my all-time favourite ineffective questions, and yes, these actually came out of a manager's mouth. The examples include, should we tell them, the graduates, how bad it is around here? Or should we just let them find out? Because we have to be honest, right? Or what about this? What do you do when you know your team has no strengths? Like when they have no strengths at all? Or what do you do if they're just plain stupid and have no clue? So there's some clangers, those ones. What about you? Could you maybe add into the chat room some of those ineffective questions that you may have heard or perhaps you've experienced in the workplace? Let's have a look. Why did you do that? What's wrong with you? Why can't you just understand? Everyone else does. Wow. Eleanor, that's, yeah, that's, wow. that's actually made me almost speechless. So there's some really ineffective questions right there. Anyone else want to add? Yeah, have a think about it and see what comes up for you in terms of some of those ineffective questions that you may have heard. Yes, I can imagine. In terms of being a healthy, happy workplace, asking those sorts of questions certainly doesn't support the idea of healthy, happy workplace. Absolutely. So here we have a little bit of a, oh yeah, there's another one. Thanks, Sonia. Don't you know better? So how's that working for you? And it's funny, Gillian, because that question, you know, is an evaluation question. But I think what's really important to note there with that question is the tone of voice that you use, because you can end up sounding really sarcastic when you ask that question. So how's that working for you? Yeah, thank you for that. So we've got a little cartoon here. Can you look at me? So let's have a read of this. Can you look at this bid and let me know if I can order the hardware? Yes. Are you saying that I can order the hardware, or yes, you'll look at it? Mumble, mumble, mumble. What? I need your input on my PowerPoint deck. So far, in response to my request, you've given me ambiguity, mumbling, and a change of subject. Would you prefer that I badger you for an answer until you get angry, or should I return to my cubicle and resume being ineffective? You ask too many questions. So there's just another example of one of those happy, healthy workplace, not the one that, that's been raised before. So yeah, ineffective questions produce ineffective environments and connections. Yeah, most certainly. Going back to that question, how's that working? You absolutely have to watch the sarcasm. Absolutely, I agree. It's one that you need to be really mindful of. So let's have a look at 16 types of ineffective questions. This one we raised before, and someone else brought it up. Eleanor, thank you. Why? Why questions? Why did you do that? Now, I'm going to go through these ineffective questions first, and then we're going to go back and have a look at how we can reframe them or create an effective question, an alternative question that actually is going to bring about better results, better connections, and better experiences in the workplace. Closed questions. Do you understand? Does that make sense? All right, so I've just noticed someone's raised their hand, so bear with me for a moment. I'm trying to work out, did someone want to say something? Could you pop it in the chat for me so I can see if there was a question there? Any questions or thoughts or comments that you'd like to make? If you could put it into the chat, webinar chat. Oh, okay, no problem. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, so the closed, do you understand? Does that make sense? The third type of ineffective question is around thought bubbles. I don't know what you were thinking. Number 4, stacked questions. What are you seeing or what are you thinking? So do you notice how there are 2 questions in that question? What are you seeing or what are you thinking? So which part do you want me to answer? 5, swearing or inappropriate How stupid is that? So it's an inappropriate question, and it's disrespectful. Being judgmental. Do you really think that's a good idea? 7, leading questions. So can I have that by the end of the week? 8, lack of empathy or tone. Is that really what you think? 9, too direct. What's the truth? You know, sometimes when we don't have that rapport built up with somebody and we come out with a question that's too direct, it can really break rapport. So before I move on to the next page of ineffective questions, and yes, there is another page of them, let's have a look at how we might be able to reframe or change these ineffective questions to effective or powerful questions. So let's focus our attention on the first one. Why? Why did you do that? Put in the chat some alternatives that you think might work instead of why did you do that? What's a better way, a more effective way of asking that question? Yes, the stacked questions. Yeah, I think sometimes when we're thinking as we're talking, just going back to the stacked questions, I've got a comment there around I can be guilty of the stacked questions. What was your thought process behind that? For what purpose did you take action? Okay, yeah, so we've got a couple of things there. So let's, first of all, I just want to focus on this. I'll get to the stacked questions bit, Eleanor, actually, when we get to number 4. But why did you do that? Some alternatives. What was your thought process behind that? Yeah, a nice open, what was your thought process behind that? Or for what purpose did you take that action? What can you do next time? What were you hoping to achieve from that? What were your thoughts leading to that decision? Yeah, they're really good, open, curious questions. So rather than why did you do that, which can sound really judgmental and it can make people feel defensive, like they have to justify their response, it's asking another question or that question in a different way that allows you to demonstrate that you're curious and you're open about, what was their thinking behind that. Let's have a look at the second one, closed questions. Do you understand? Does that make sense? Now, closed questions are good when you want commitment or you want a yes or no answer. When you're asking, do you understand? You're going to get yes or no, certainly. I'm wondering if you're really wanting to know if somebody's understanding something, what's a better way of asking that question, do you think? Rather than that closed question, do you understand? If your intention is to really understand if someone understands something, what's a better way of asking that question? Yeah, is there anything else that would make this conversation more complete for you? Lovely, absolutely. Nice reference to our extended grow. Well done, Eleanor. How do you feel about our conversation so far? Lovely question, Catherine. Well done. What is your understanding so far? Nice work, Sonia. Yep, terrific. What is your understanding of that? Lovely. That's terrific. So what you're doing is you're opening up you're opening up that conversation and you're inviting that person to then feed back to you what their understanding is and how they understand what the conversation's been so far. So that's terrific. Well done. All right, let's have a look at the thought bubble. I don't know what you're thinking. Interesting. So I don't know what you're thinking. How else could we communicate that message through a better, effective question. What do you think? I don't know what you're thinking. That's a thought bubble. What is your understanding of that? I'm curious. What are your thoughts? Lovely. Absolutely. What are your thoughts behind this? Very nice. Absolutely. Yep. So everyone's along the same lines, thinking along the same lines. It's opening it up to being curious around, you know, where did that come from, or how did you come to that conclusion? What are your thoughts on this? What's your thinking behind this? Lovely. Again, a beautiful open question. Let's have a look at the stacked questions. And I remember, I think someone earlier said that they're a bit guilty of the stacked questions. And, you know, it can be easy to fall into that stacking a question, because sometimes we're thinking as we're talking and we're talking as we're thinking. And so therefore, as we're thinking, we're saying what's going through our head, what we're processing. So sometimes that can come out as a stacked question. So one of the ways to prevent that from happening is to stay in the silence and formulate your question first. Think about your question first before you ask, so that you don't need to redesign your question through stacking it. Sometimes if you ask a question and you feel like it hasn't quite been the right question that you wanted to ask, you'll ask another one on top of it maybe. So that's why it's a good idea to take the time to formulate the question in your mind and then ask the one question rather than the two on top of each other. Swearing and inappropriate language and inappropriate questions like, how stupid is that? Yeah, I mean, quite clearly that's a really inappropriate question. So what's our intention here? How stupid is that? You know, suggesting that something might have been silly, or perhaps someone's made an ineffective choice or a bad decision. Not quite sure the intention, what's the message that person's trying to give. What do you think in terms of this particular ineffective question model, the swearing and the inappropriate, how stupid is that as the example? What else could you say instead, do you think? Yeah, and absolutely right. As you say in the chat box there, are you really expecting an answer to that question? Exactly, yeah. You know, it's putting our judgment on it when there's no place for it, absolutely. What's your opinion on this, or what do you think about that? Yeah, absolutely. So rather than how stupid is that, if you really honestly need to evaluate something, rather than suggesting something stupid, you know, perhaps taking a different perspective and reframing whatever it is that is, you know, thinking about how can we reevaluate this? How can we look at this from a different perspective? How can we improve the result, for example? Those sorts of open questions rather than how stupid is that, which is totally ineffective and unsupportive. So what about the judgmental? Do you really think that's a good idea? What's a better way of asking that question if you're trying to evaluate an idea? What do you think? What's a more effective way of removing the judgment and asking an open, curious question? Yeah, what outcome would you like to achieve? What's the outcome you're aiming for here? What do you think would be the outcome of that course of action? Terrific. Yeah, really great. Really good, open and curious questions. All right, let's have a look at leading questions. The example there. So can I have that by the end of the week? How else could we frame that question to become more effective? What are your ideas around that? What time frame do you anticipate for that? Good one. What else? When could you deliver this? Great. Absolutely. Good thinking, everyone. That's really great. Those good open questions. Okay, let's have a look at lack of empathy in our tone. Is that what you really think? Is that really what you think? Now, thinking about that particular question, is that really what you think? How can we change that to a more effective question? Have a think about that for a moment. What do you think? How could we change that to become more effective? How does this decision make you feel? Yeah, I like that. That's a nice question. How did you come to that conclusion? Good one. I like that too. You know, using a laser question or a focused question like, so what do you really think? The tone that you use, what are your thoughts around that? Yep, good one. I like it. It's the kind of question really that, again, like being too direct, you need to have some sort of rapport, but the tone in which you use can make a big difference to the way questions are received. What are your thoughts around that? How did you come to that conclusion? When could you, and how does that decision feel for you? Good questions. Being mindful of our tone, the way we ask our questions. And too direct, what's the truth? So again, you know, this question's valuable when we use it with rapport. So an ineffective question can become effective in the right environment. But for example, what's the truth? How else could we ask that question so it's not so direct, so it's a bit softer? What do you think? Any ideas around that one? What else? Yep, that's a good one. Yep, nice one. And you'll get there eventually. How confident in that are you? Things like, what's at the core of this? What are the key facts? What do you think's at the heart of the matter, for example? Just softening the question a little bit more so it's not so direct. All right, let's have a look at some more. Good job, everyone. Poor timing. Okay, so, you know, we need to be mindful around our questions when we're asking our questions too, because timing can have an impact on whether a question is ineffective or effective. It doesn't necessarily mean that your question itself, like the last 9 that we've looked at, it doesn't necessarily mean that the question itself is ineffective, but when you say it can have an impact. So again, being mindful of not only the question we're asking, but the environment in which we're in as well. Number 11, or. The word, finishing our question with or. So is that something you can do, or that question's ineffective? So let's have a look at how we can reframe that question to be more effective. What are we looking to achieve through that question? So is that something you can do, or have a think about that for a second. How could you reword that question to be more effective? Yes. What are you willing or able to commit to here? Yep, lovely question. What are you willing to commit to, or what are you able to commit to? What support do you need to achieve that outcome? Lovely. Really nice questions. It might be something like, how can you achieve this? How can you do this? What do you need to do to make it happen? More open and curious. or finishing our questions with right. That sort of leading confirmation. So we're good to go, right? It's a leading confirmation question. So we're good to go, right? So if we were to change that ineffective question to a more effective question, how could we reword that so that we get our confirmation, but it's more open and respectful? What do you think? What are some ideas that you've got around this? So for example, it might be, when would be appropriate for us to move forward on this, for example? How comfortable are you with this arrangement now? Is this the right way forward? How does that sit with you? Yep, lovely questions. Yep, terrific. We instead of you. Yes, and another good one, thank you. How likely are you to achieve this? Great. How does that sit with you? Great, terrific. Well done. Number 13, we instead of you. So what can we do about this? I sometimes hear this when I'm listening or listening to coaching demonstrations. Sometimes I pick up on the coach saying, how can we do this, or what can we do about that? And I need to catch it, because when we're coaching, of course, or coaching somebody else, we want to have that conversation with the understanding that the coachee is responsible for their decisions and their way forward. So instead of we, it's you. So what can you do about it? So it's allowing that coachee to recognise that they're responsible for their decisions, they're responsible for their way forward, and they're taking action. You're empowering them to make decisions and move forward. Yeah, so some good questions around here. So what ideas do you have to address this? Great question if a manager who really is collaborating on a project, but not if it's the responsibility of an individual. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good distinction too. Certainly when we're coaching an individual, what can you do about it rather than what can we do about it? Overly wordy. So you've got a question that seems to go on for what could be 3 sentences. So here, this is another example of where we're thinking as we're talking and talking as we're thinking. So again, it's another opportunity to sit in the silence for a moment and to think about the question we want to ask. Number 15, not related to what the client was saying. So how well are you listening to what your client is saying, your coachee is saying? Really being mindful that we're listening clearly and we're focusing on that person, so we're understanding what they're saying, so our question's relevant and related. Asking a question to fill the silence. This is a real opportunity. The silence is golden, and it's a real opportunity for people to think and reflect on what's going on in their minds. And we probably could do it more often than what we do. So practicing and getting really comfortable with sitting in the silence. So ask a question and wait. Allow that person to think or reflect before they come up with their answer. Sometimes it can be spoiled by filling that space with a question. So our practice as coaches, of course, is to tighten up our questions. Every time we go to say something, be mindful and aware of how we are asking our questions. Take a moment to really think about designing your question in a way that's going to be powerful, effective, and impactful for that person, to support them in taking responsibility, to support them in moving forward, and to support them in their independent thinking. So that brings us to the end of our Coaching Cafe today. Remember, we have other courses available for you, including our Leader as Coach program and our mental health first aid program as well. And certainly, of course, we have our Certificate 4 and our Diploma in Workplace and Business Coaching. All of these are opportunities to provide you with opportunities to coach and get really great at asking great questions. So I encourage you to enjoy your coaching, go forth and ask some really great, effective questions, and have a really great day. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing you again at another time. Bye, everybody. Pleasure. That's a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.